In fact, did you know your own historical roots? It's not me. If you do a study in the history of Adventism, the Millerites, William Miller and his followers, they were
Yes.
actually the ones who influenced Charles Taze Russell. Jehovah's Witnesses are the product of Adventism. Let me give you a little history. You can verify this. You don't take my word for it. Charles Taze Russell had lost his faith in the Bible because of Trinity and hell. He encountered a group of Adventists, the Millerites, who taught there is no Trinity, that Christ is the first creation of God, like Arius taught, and hell is not forever. So then they reinvigorated his faith, and he started the Jehovah's Witnesses. The original Adventists were anti-Trinitarians. The original Adventists. This is not a lie. You can go online. There's now a movement of Adventists who are calling those Adventists who say they believe in the Trinity to return to their roots, their Adventist roots, that the Trinity is not part of our heritage. The Millerites were not Trinitarians. We need to go back to the belief that God birthed the Word before all other creatures, but the Word is not as old as God. So it's ironic because your movement started the Jehovah's Witnesses. Why do you think you and Jehovah's Witnesses both believe that Christ is the Archangel Michael? If you don't know the roots of Adventism, it started in the 1800s. Let me explain the background. 1800s, there was a revival, so to speak, where people claimed that Jesus was appearing to them, telling them that they were appointed to restore the church. That's why they're called the Restorationist movement. They will teach you, Jehovah's Witnesses teach you this, Adventists teach you this, Campbellites teach you this, because there was also the Campbellites. They're the churches of Christ. That with the death of the last Apostle John, starting 2nd century, the church became corrupt. The truth was lost until the Lord decided 1700 years later to then restore the church that had been lost. Now, you don't understand that's blasphemy, right? Because that means Jesus remained inactive, uninterested in the affairs of the church for 1700 years. And all of a sudden, he now was interested again. And then he decided to call these individuals to restore the church. But then we got a problem. In the 1800s, several people claimed that Christ had raised them up to restore the church. That's where you get Adventism. That's where you get Jehovah's Witnesses. That's where you get the Churches of Christ. But they don't all agree. So which of them, by the way, the Mormons as well. I forgot to mention the Mormons. Joseph Smith too. In fact, Joseph Smith was related to Ellen G. White. Joseph Smith claimed that the angel Moroni, but initially it was God the Father and Jesus Christ who appeared to him, that told him about these golden plates that were in Egyptian hieroglyphics, and he deciphered those plates and came up with the Book of Mormon. So, number one, why did the Lord wait for 1700 years to restore the church? Number two, which of these groups are truly raised up by Christ to restore the church? Mormons say it was Joseph Smith, and they have an ongoing series of prophets. Charles Taze Russell says he and his movement, which now is the Jehovah's Witnesses. Adventists say it's them. Churches of Christ say it's them. What am I getting at? Your roots are not sola scriptura, tota scriptura. The fact that you're studying the Bible, you're seeing the errors, that's a good thing. But these roots only take you as far back as the 1800s. Now, let's say you now want to forego all these denominations, and you want to go back to earlier roots of Christianity. Well, if you stay Protestant, your roots are no earlier than the 1500s. So if you stay Protestant, your roots only go back to the 1500s. And even in Protestantism, it is now morphed into so many different denominations that all claim to be Protestants, and many claim to be evangelicals. So even then, you're in no man's land, because one day you're going to go to a Baptist church, other day you're going to go to a Presbyterian church, other day you're going to go to an Episcopalian church, and you'll never settle because you're always going to be confused. You're always going to be second guessing and changing your views. Even in Baptist churches, are you going to be Free Will Baptist? Are you going to be Independent Fundamental Baptist? King James only? Are you going to be Reformed Baptist that believe in the 5 points of Calvinism? So if you're really on a journey and you really believe the promises of Scripture, and you really believe that God has preserved the church and the church has never become corrupt or apostate, but he's with the church and preserving the church against heretics from the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, then you're going to have to start looking into what those Christians taught, what those Christians believed in the 2nd century, in the 3rd century, in the 4th century. See who these true men of God were, like Athanasius or Ignatius. See what they said about Scripture. See what they taught about the interpretation of Scripture, because they're the men God used to preserve Scriptures, canonize Scriptures, and preserve the church. And you won't remain Protestant. You're going to leave.